In some of America's most secure correctional facilities, long-term solitary confinement is not an exception. It is a tool of institutional control. Cells are designed to strip away sensory input, to reduce human contact to a minimum. The average isolation unit measures under 60 square feet, enough to stand, sit, or lie down, but never enough to move freely. Concrete walls, steel doors, and fluorescent lighting are constant companions. The door itself is a barrier, both literal and psychological, separating the individual from human connection for 22 to 24 hours each day. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics and multiple state correctional reports, inmates placed in long-term solitary confinement experience restricted access to social interaction, recreation, and meaningful stimuli. Meals are slid through a slot in the door with no shared dining space, no conversation, no communal presence. Even personal property is limited. Books, letters, or photographs are carefully regulated. Guards maintain strict routines, passing silently through corridors, their presence felt more as surveillance than as human contact. Isolation cells are not just physically confining, they are psychologically distinct. Research documented in the Journal of the American Academy of Psychiatry and the American Psychological Association notes that sensory deprivation, coupled with extended social isolation, can result in anxiety, hallucinations, insomnia, and persistent depression. The effects are cumulative. Inmates confined for months or years often describe a loss of temporal awareness, difficulty in maintaining concentration, and a breakdown of normal emotional responses. These are not dramatized accounts. They are observed and recorded by prison mental health professionals, reported in official reviews, and corroborated by longitudinal studies. The doors to these cells are rarely open. Recreation time is brief, often limited to a small enclosed yard surrounded by high walls and fencing. In some facilities, this yard measures no more than 12 by 12 feet. Interaction with staff or other inmates is minimal, tightly scheduled, and monitored. Even in these moments, the environment emphasizes observation over engagement. Guards wear dark uniforms and maintain formal posture, moving in patterns designed to minimize risk but also to reinforce the prisoner's isolation. Documented cases, such as those reported by the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Vera Institute of Justice, show that repeated exposure to solitary confinement has irreversible psychological effects for some individuals. Inmates can develop hypervigilance, emotional numbness, or a profound sense of disconnection from reality. In certain high-security prisons, a single cell may be occupied continuously for years. Time is measured not in weeks or months, but in days counted through routines that offer no meaningful stimulation or social reinforcement. The cell itself amplifies this isolation. Concrete walls reflect sound, creating a hollow echo when a door clanks or a distant footstep passes. Fluorescent lighting is constant, or in some units, flickering unpredictably, disrupting the circadian rhythm. The steel toilet and sink offer functionality but no comfort. There is no privacy and every movement is monitored. Closed-circuit cameras watch continuously, a visual reminder of surveillance and control. Official reports from the U.S. Department of Justice highlight that solitary confinement is often applied to inmates deemed dangerous, disruptive, or at risk of self-harm. Yet, the very conditions intended to mitigate risk can intensify psychological stress. Case files show an increased need for mental health interventions, ranging from counseling to medical treatment for anxiety and depression. These interventions are reactive, responding to crises, rather than preventive. Even the most basic human routines are regimented. Meals, exercise, and hygiene are scheduled with precise timing. Sleep may be fragmented by rounds of security checks or alarms. Social contact is limited to occasional visits, screened through partitions or monitored phone calls, which, according to reports, are often heavily restricted. The absence of informal communication, the casual conversation, the shared observation of daily life, is notable. It is the deprivation of these small, ordinary interactions that shapes the psychological landscape of long-term isolation. The cell door opens only to brief, structured activity. Inmates leave the confined space under guard supervision, sometimes for medical appointments, sometimes for monitored recreation. Even these moments are controlled. Documentation from the Bureau of Justice Statistics indicates that time outside the cell is usually less than an hour per day. Guards maintain visual contact at all times, their posture formal, their movements deliberate. There is no ambiguity in the hierarchy of control. Inmate health records and psychiatric evaluations reveal the long-term consequences of this confinement. A 2019 report by the Correctional Leaders Association noted that extended solitary confinement increases the risk of post-traumatic stress symptoms, cognitive impairment, and persistent emotional distress. Inmates often report feelings of emptiness and depersonalization, a direct response to sensory and social deprivation. Yet, despite these documented effects, solitary confinement remains a tool widely used across U.S. prisons. Policy reviews show it is justified for maintaining order, protecting staff, and segregating those deemed high risk. At the same time, advocates and oversight bodies continue to challenge the practice, citing ethical concerns and long-term human costs. This is the reality that greets inmates on day one in these units. Concrete, light, steel, and silence. A human presence reduced to observation, movement confined to measured steps, interaction limited to survival tasks. The cell is designed to contain, to control, and to limit the individual's experience of time, space, and connection. And while the doors may open occasionally, the weight of isolation lingers, shaping perception and cognition in ways that are difficult to reverse. This is not dramatization. These are verifiable facts, drawn from official prison reports, mental health evaluations, and documented longitudinal studies. The conditions of long-term solitary confinement in the United States present a stark, unembellished view of the consequences of extreme institutional control. For viewers seeking to understand this environment in depth, subscribing to this series will provide a measured, factual perspective on the realities within America's correctional system. Each episode is grounded in verified records, first-hand accounts, and institutional documentation, offering a lens into experiences often hidden from public view. This is the silence of isolation. Beyond solitary cells, the larger prison architecture exerts its own form of control. Maximum security facilities are designed to regulate movement, monitor behavior, and enforce hierarchy through physical structure. Cell blocks are long and narrow, often with mirrored symmetry, creating a visual sense of order that mirrors institutional expectations. Each cell is identical in size and layout, reinforcing uniformity and eliminating personal spatial distinction. Observation windows, typically no larger than 6 by 12 inches, allow guards to monitor activity without direct interaction. According to architectural reports and correctional facility manuals, these windows serve dual purposes: security and psychological management. They are positioned to allow a continuous line of sight down corridors while limiting the inmate's ability to see beyond the cell. This design restricts awareness of the broader environment, reinforcing the perception of confinement. Lighting in these corridors is intentionally uniform and persistent. Fluorescent fixtures hum constantly, casting shadows that accentuate the rigid geometry of the space. Correctional officers are trained to patrol at precise intervals, walking predefined routes that maximize visibility and minimize blind spots. The institutional emphasis is on predictability, repetition, and the enforcement of routines. Movement within the cell block is tightly regulated. Inmates are permitted to leave their cells for meals, exercise, or scheduled programs according to a strict timetable. Doors open and close according to prearranged schedules. Documentation from the Federal Bureau of Prisons shows that even minor deviations from these schedules are recorded, monitored, and may result in disciplinary action. The architecture itself becomes a mechanism of control, embedding rules into the very environment. Repetition dominates daily life. Inmates rise, move, and return according to the same sequence each day. Meals are delivered on a fixed schedule, often through slots in the steel doors. Recreation occurs in identical enclosed yards, sometimes no larger than the cell itself, separated by high fences and overhead netting. Every element is designed to minimize unpredictability, to maintain safety, and to limit spontaneous social interaction. The spatial design also imposes psychological pressures. Studies from the American Psychological Association confirm that repetitive, monotonous environments contribute to stress, disorientation, and the erosion of temporal perception. Inmates describe a sense of sameness, a feeling that days blend indistinguishably into one another. Time is regulated externally by the environment, not internally by the individual. Security features are prominent and unavoidable. Steel bars, reinforced doors, and surveillance cameras dominate the visual landscape. Guard towers overlook exercise yards and common areas, providing constant oversight. Intercoms, alarms, and controlled gates further regulate access and movement. Each architectural decision prioritizes containment and observation, often at the expense of personal autonomy. These structural conditions also reinforce social hierarchies. Inmates are acutely aware of the lines of sight and the visibility of their behavior. Physical separation is maintained between cells, corridors, and recreation areas, reducing informal contact. Interaction is limited, measured, and, in some cases, adversarial. Documentation from correctional audits indicates that such design features reduce risk of altercations but contribute to social isolation, stress, and heightened vigilance among inmates. Within these corridors, even small details carry meaning. The clanging of a cell door signals authority and compliance. Repetition of patterns, the identical arrangement of cells, the timing of lights, the cadence of patrols, conditions inmates to expect regulation in every movement. In some cases, the monotony of this architecture intensifies mental strain, particularly for those already experiencing the psychological effects of long-term confinement. Correctional studies highlight that architecture is inseparable from institutional practice. The design of cell blocks, observation points, and recreational areas directly influences behavior, emotional state, and mental health outcomes. Spatial restriction is a tool of both safety and psychological management. Every wall, door, and corridor reflects decades of policy and research aimed at maintaining control within environments populated by individuals deemed high risk. The repetition of cell block design underscores a broader principle. In maximum security prisons, physical space is an instrument of authority. Uniformity, observation, and constraint shape the daily experience. The environment is functional, precise, and unyielding. It defines the boundaries of autonomy, dictates movement, and conditions perception. Subscribing to this documentary series offers insight into these carefully structured spaces. Each visual and narrative detail draws directly from verified reports, architectural plans, and institutional documentation. By examining the environment itself, viewers can begin to understand how physical space interacts with policy, behavior, and mental endurance. The corridors extend into the distance, identical and unbroken. Behind each steel door is a confined life, measured in steps, routines, and observation. This is the architecture of confinement. Within prison walls, much of daily life is governed by waiting. Minutes, hours, and days are delineated by routine. Inmates rise at prescribed times, move through meals, recreation, and work according to schedules dictated by the institution. Every activity, even the simplest, is regulated. Correctional facility manuals specify exact timing for showers, meals, yard time, and counts. The structure is uniform across entire cell blocks, leaving little room for spontaneity or personal agency. Time in confinement is not experienced as it is outside. Reports from the National Institute of Corrections describe a phenomenon among long-term inmates: temporal distortion. Hours stretch without variation, punctuated by mechanical events, doors opening, meals delivered, headcounts conducted. The monotony is compounded in units where inmates are isolated from one another, or where interaction is minimal. In these environments, waiting becomes the dominant activity, shaping perception and mental endurance. Meals, often a brief interruption in the day, follow predictable patterns. Food is delivered through slots in steel doors, or served in institutional dining halls under constant observation. There is little opportunity for social interaction. Nutrition is monitored for compliance with federal or state regulations, but beyond this functional requirement, the experience is devoid of choice or personalization. Reports from the Federal Bureau of Prisons indicate that this predictability, while ensuring operational control, reinforces the sense of temporal stagnation. Recreation, when permitted, is similarly constrained. Inmates may spend 1 hour per day in an enclosed yard or gymnasium. These spaces are designed to prevent unsupervised contact, limit movement, and maintain visibility. Correctional officers monitor activity continuously, walking precise patterns. Photographs and architectural reports from multiple state facilities confirm that yards are small, enclosed by high walls and fencing, with minimal variation between institutions. Within these confined areas, physical activity may occur, but it is measured, observed, and bounded. Work assignments provide another structured measure of time. Inmates may be assigned to kitchen duties, laundry, or maintenance tasks. Official reports describe these roles as carefully monitored, with performance and compliance recorded daily. Even in labor, autonomy is limited. Tasks are repetitive, designed for operational efficiency rather than skill development. Correctional studies note that while work can provide a distraction from monotony, it rarely mitigates the psychological weight of confinement. Social interaction is tightly controlled. In some prisons, inmates may communicate with neighbors only during specified periods, under observation. In others, conversation is restricted entirely. Case reviews, such as those published by the Vera Institute of Justice, highlight that limited social contact intensifies stress, increases vigilance, and contributes to emotional detachment. Even small gestures, a nod, a shared glance, carry weight in environments where unmonitored interaction is prohibited. Institutional routines extend to hygiene and health care. Showers are scheduled, sometimes shared, sometimes individual, but always brief. Medical visits are organized and monitored, with staff present to maintain order. Mental health professionals provide counseling in structured sessions, often in observation rooms. Official records note that the timing, frequency, and duration of these interactions are strictly regulated. While intended to ensure safety, the structured nature of these services further emphasizes the lack of personal autonomy. Inmates adapt to this environment in documented ways. Studies in corrections psychology report that some develop regimented personal routines, exercising in small spaces, reading within strict schedules, or writing letters during allotted periods. These adaptations are coping mechanisms, allowing individuals to exert minimal control over an otherwise rigidly controlled day. Reports note that these behaviors can help preserve mental stability, yet they exist entirely within the constraints imposed by the institution. Waiting also defines perception. In institutional settings, hours can feel like days and days like weeks. Time is marked by external events rather than internal experience. Headcounts, lock-ins, and lockdowns provide intermittent markers in an otherwise continuous, controlled passage of time. The psychological impact of this form of temporal regulation is well documented. Inmates report increased stress, disorientation, and heightened sensitivity to environmental stimuli. Even the smallest changes, a delayed meal or an unscheduled door opening, can provoke anxiety or agitation. Routine is both protective and constraining. It maintains safety, ensures order, and limits conflict. Yet, the very mechanisms that safeguard the institution also shape the inner lives of those confined. The predictability of schedules, the enforcement of rules, and the limitation of personal choice contribute to a mental landscape defined by anticipation, adaptation, and endurance. Subscribing to this series will continue to provide insight into these dynamics, grounded in verified documentation and first-hand reports. The daily rhythms, measured movements, and structured waiting illustrate the lived reality of incarceration. They reveal the subtle, enduring impact of institutional control, beyond the physical confinement. Time is measured in headcounts, meals, and lockdowns. Movement is restricted, observation is constant, and autonomy is constrained. In the dayroom, in the yard, in the corridors, every aspect of daily life is defined by routine and surveillance. This is the weight of waiting. Isolation and regimented routine affect more than physical presence. They shape the mind. Documented studies from the National Institute of Justice and the American Psychological Association consistently link extended confinement with measurable psychological impacts. Anxiety, depression, hallucinations, insomnia, and emotional dysregulation are commonly observed among inmates in long-term solitary or high-security confinement. These are not anecdotal accounts. They are recorded in medical evaluations, facility incident reports, and longitudinal research tracking the mental health of incarcerated individuals over months and years. Mental health units exist in many maximum security facilities, designed to provide intervention for those struggling under these conditions. Yet even within these clinical spaces, the environment remains constrained. Observation is constant. Interactions are limited. Sessions with psychologists or social workers are brief and structured, often interrupted by security requirements or institutional protocols. Case records demonstrate that while interventions can stabilize acute crises, they do not always reverse the cumulative psychological strain caused by prolonged confinement. Sensory deprivation amplifies mental strain. In small cells, walls and floors reflect sound, creating a constant, subtle echo. Lighting is uniform and unyielding. Outside noise, footsteps, clanging doors, distant alarms, is predictable but unavoidable. For inmates, this consistency offers no relief, only repetition. Research indicates that the lack of sensory variation disrupts normal cognitive processing, impairing concentration, memory, and emotional regulation. Sleep disturbances are particularly pervasive. Official reports from the Federal Bureau of Prisons note that inmates frequently experience interrupted sleep due to environmental factors, such as constant lighting, nighttime security checks, and institutional noise. Over time, these interruptions contribute to impaired judgment, heightened irritability, and increased susceptibility to mental health crises. Observational studies confirm that sleep deprivation, even when not intentional, is a persistent consequence of the institutional environment. The lack of meaningful social interaction further compounds psychological strain. In maximum security units, inmates often spend the majority of their day alone. Contact with staff is functional, not personal. Interaction with other inmates is limited, monitored, and often scheduled in brief periods. Documentation from the Vera Institute of Justice emphasizes that social deprivation is a significant predictor of stress, anxiety, and depressive symptoms. The absence of informal human connection, a conversation, shared observation, or casual exchange, exacerbates the sense of isolation. Mental health crises, when they occur, are addressed within the constraints of the institution. Clinical staff operate under strict security protocols, limiting intervention to observation, structured counseling, and in some cases pharmacological management. Case reviews highlight that even when psychiatric support is provided, the surrounding environment, the same walls, locked doors, and regimented schedules, remains unchanged. The source of stress persists alongside the intervention. Documented longitudinal studies reveal that prolonged exposure to these conditions can produce lasting effects. Some individuals show persistent cognitive deficits, emotional flattening, or heightened sensitivity to stress even after release. Reports from correctional mental health programs note that while resilience varies among individuals, the structural and procedural elements of confinement contribute consistently to these outcomes. Coping mechanisms are often documented and observed. Some inmates engage in regimented personal routines, exercises in small spaces, reading or writing during allotted times, or practicing meditation and religious rituals where permitted. These behaviors provide limited control over one's environment and help maintain psychological stability. Institutional reports note that such adaptations are important for mental endurance, but they occur entirely within the imposed boundaries of confinement. Subscribing to this series provides continued, verified insight into these realities. The psychological dimension of incarceration is inseparable from the physical. Walls, doors, and schedules shape not only behavior but cognition, emotion, and identity. By observing documented mental health outcomes, viewers gain a clear understanding of the human impact of confinement without dramatization or embellishment. In these silent, clinical spaces, the mind confronts the consequences of prolonged isolation, monotony, and surveillance. The psychological weight of confinement is persistent, measurable, and often irreversible. It is the unseen architecture of control as potent as steel bars or locked doors. Across every unit, every cell block, and every yard, the reality of incarceration is constant and measurable. Time is regimented. Movement is controlled. Interaction is limited. The architecture, the schedules, and the surveillance create a persistent environment of order, restriction, and observation. These are not stories or dramatizations. They are documented, verified realities, recorded in public records, academic research, and first-hand institutional reports. Inmates endure repetition, waiting, and constrained movement. They navigate small spaces, monitor routines, and adapt in ways that are observable and recorded. Mental health evaluations, correctional audits, and academic studies all confirm that these conditions have profound and lasting effects. Anxiety, cognitive disruption, and emotional strain are well-documented outcomes of extended confinement. Yet even within these structures, small adaptations emerge. Regulated routines, personal coping strategies, and permitted activities offer the briefest measure of control. Faith, reading, or physical exercise may provide focus or distraction, but always within the boundaries of institutional regulation. These behaviors are recorded and studied because they illustrate human resilience under extreme constraint, not because they transform the environment. For viewers, the documentary has provided a window into the measured reality of incarceration. It has examined the silence of solitary confinement, the repetition of cell blocks, the weight of waiting, and the psychological toll documented in official records. It has relied on verified information and first-hand observation, presenting conditions as they exist, without embellishment. The human presence within these walls is defined by endurance. Observing, adapting, and surviving within a highly controlled environment is the unspoken rhythm of daily life. The structures, routines, and observation systems that maintain order are also the instruments that shape perception, cognition, and mental health. We invite viewers to engage further. Please share your thoughts, reflect on what you've seen, and consider the human dimensions behind these statistics and reports. Your comments, likes, and subscriptions help support continued factual exploration of institutions that are otherwise hidden from public view. By observing documented realities we gain understanding, not judgment. The walls remain, the routines continue, and the silence endures. But through careful documentation and observation, we are able to witness the lived reality of confinement, its constraints, its adaptations, and its persistent impact on those inside. This is the enduring reality of America's prison system.